Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
The unknown, and the
paranormal. I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kristen Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny.
Hi, welcome to Bigfoot and the Bunny. I'm Kristen Johnson.
And I'm Chris Carr. And we are here tonight. We had a great show for you guys. We have Duo Daemonologie, which features Carl Johnson and James Annitto. They're there with us now. How you doing, guys?
Very well, thank you.
Doing
Good
good,
evening to you. Thank you for having us.
Definitely.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate it. Joe, I just want to let you know I'm not getting a live stream on the YouTube. Just going to throw that out there real quick. I keep refreshing, but nothing. But yeah, we wanted to talk about your new project. So what is Duo Daemonologie about? And what kind of events are you guys going to be hosting?
Well, obviously, it involves demonology, which is a study, and we're hoping a legitimate study, a science. And the duo comes from it is comprised of James Annitto and myself, Carl Johnson. A duo demonologist, Duo Daemonologie. He came up with the spelling. Very archaic. Why does that?
Yeah, really like that.
We like the spelling, and I noticed it came from, there's a book by King James called Demonology with the same spelling, which for our audience is Daemonologie.
I thought you just wanted to put an S on the end.
Ies. But I love that spelling, and I think it's catchy.
Yeah,
Was that book part of the reason why you spelled it that way?
yeah. I definitely wanted a more old approach to it, a more sincere approach to what demonology is, and basically, Demonology by King James was a really big book for me in the forefront of getting involved in demonology and how old and how a lot of people don't know the story about Demonology by King James,
The evolution and progression of demonology.
and how it really kind of impacted pop culture. You know, William Shakespeare was inspired to write Macbeth because of that book. So there are just a lot of things about that book that really made me want to incorporate the name. And of course, duo being Latin for two, I just really wanted something that would roll off the tongue, but would also be a centralized factor of what this was, bring it back to the roots.
Descriptive of what we do.
Yeah, descriptive. And of course, I think it's just something that fits well for us.
Yes, Duo Daemonologie. And of course, it is a serious subject, demonology, but again, we're trying to legitimize this. It's not just a scary thing. It's a study of the mind. It's a study of the spirit. And we, of course, are always learning as we go along.
Very true.
Well, we failed as a comedy. We were a comedy team, and we were doing stand-up for a while around, and that we gave it a good shot. People weren't laughing. So if we can't make them laugh, we'll make them scared. So,
Comedy's rough, you know. I'd be more scared of the audience than maybe even demons, you know.
I have I'm sorry. I don't want to think about what we were talking about earlier because I'll end up not being able to talk at all with your comedy stuff.
I'll be happy.
No,
I'll be here all week.
I ruined you.
Great.
I'm sorry.
No.
I brought this on
I was
myself.
going to say something else, but so do you to perform exorcisms and banish negative spirits and entities? How do you go about this?
We have had individual experiences unique to each other. I participated in 2 expulsions, which is a lesser form of exorcism. It's not the ritualis romanus. It's throwing out a spirit, casting out a spirit, or endeavoring to do such. And James has had similar experiences. We just haven't done this together yet. We don't know what the future holds in store, but it's what comes our way.
Yeah, I'm not an exorcist either. I was deliverance minister for a previous denomination church, but I am a Catholic deacon. But I can in emergency situations still perform deliverances, but no, I do not perform exorcisms. Basically, what Carl and I do in retrospect is basically we are the individuals that come and assess a situation, and then that is where we start to determine where this goes. And if exorcism or deliverance or expulsion is part of that equation, then that's what we start leaning towards. But we are more the assessors, and
Yes.
We determine what is going on in the location.
So primarily that is our function. It's not that we would come in and assess and then perform the exorcism and we're a complete package. We would help that person, refer them to either the clinical help they need or the spiritual guidance they would need. When I said I participated in 2 expulsions, there was kind of spur of the moment. Both were emergency situations, and I was compelled to act at the time. I must say I'm glad I did, but if there was more planning and more preparation was allowed at that time, I would have tried to find somebody to perform an actual exorcism. But I did work in that capacity at the time.
And sometimes we have to, even though
Yeah.
I've never performed a legitimate exorcism, but sometimes, like you said, you have to perform lesser rites of things in that, because sometimes, in true cases, it could be a split second where that person in transient possession could snap and that entity comes forth. So you need to do something in an emergency to keep everybody safe, including the client themselves.
And that's an interesting term that James uses, transient possession, in transience, forming, coming on someone.
Does that mean that they are maybe temporarily possessed or go through
Well,
emotions?
it's delineating between transient possession and total possession here. Possession, of course, is a very an emergency situation, you say, and that's a matter of life and death. Or you could say salvation of the soul, but rescuing of the mind as well.
Yeah, the transient possession is where that person's free will is still there. Basically, that person is able to fight their consciousness and fight this entity as the leeching it is, the manipulator is, and they're able to come back forth. And so this is when this entity comes back and forth in a total or perfect possession. Basically, that person's free will has been destroyed, and the entity has a full foothold within that person. And even though both levels of possession are rare, a total or perfect possession is in the low percentages, single digits.
One could say exceedingly rare.
More rare than transient in itself. Yeah.
Most people trained in exorcism have not encountered that perfect or full possession.
I think there's only been a few,
fortunately,
true cases ever documented of that situation. So there's not really too much to say that I've experienced it.
In your experience in these kind of possessions, have you seen physical effects like are portrayed in the movies? I mean, obviously in The Exorcist, you have her head spinning around and some kind of crazy stuff that doesn't seem physically possible.
I've seen that on a dance floor, but head spinning, yeah. People more flexible than I. Yeah.
What is the effect like? What is it that you see, and what are the signs of truth?
Where from socializing, and there are signs that they're exhibiting another personality that seems to be coming through. They're acting bizarre, uncharacteristic of themselves. As far as you asked, the more obvious signs, well, I have seen some things that were stretched the imagination, but I know they happened. I was involved in a case of outright possession. This was, I think I would call this a perfect possession, or certainly close to that. And it involved a boy of 14 years of age, and this was in Providence, Rhode Island, a number of years, decades ago now. And I was invited to stay overnight to this boy's house, and well, it was around 1 a.m, and I was just dozing off on a sofa adjacent to his bedroom. Well, around 1, suddenly I was awoken by a scream, a blood-curdling scream, and so I flipped on the wall switch, and this boy's bedroom door just flung open on its own about that speed, and his body was flung out of the room. It was like he was being tossed by invisible hands, and I'm thinking of the somatic possibilities. Could a seizure do this? I don't see how, because he was actually being propelled off the floor and against the walls, his body spinning rapidly. It's one thing to talk about it, but to actually see this. I just stood there transfixed, immobile for what seemed like a long time, but it was probably a handful of seconds. Then this boy darted past me, jumped up on the sofa where I had reclined, and started to jump up and down, and this deep growling laugh, this guttural laugh came out of his throat. Then he flew at me, and I tried to restrain him. I was my normal 200 pounds, and I put my weight on him. He just pushed me right off. Then he came out of himself, out of this fit, and he was terrified. He was shaking and crying, calling for his uncle to come in. And that's when it was determined that some kind of procedure was necessary. And at the agreement of the family and others that came in to assist, we performed that expulsion rite. And it was successful. These don't always have happy endings. This one succeeded. It seemed to rid him. And it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen with that one session. But there was a pivotal junction where the spirit was cast out, commanded to give a sign of its presence and its leaving. And he was much better after that. He never suffered recurrences of this.
Yeah, I never experienced the head spinning or the pea soup. The vomiting is in a case where if the expulsion does happen, there is some sort of expulsion of
a release
vomiting. Even
He
poop.
admits that, yeah.
But
He was
peeing yourself, urinating yourself. These are expulsion. The body that something happens to the body with the expulsion. But the craziest thing I seen within that process was definitely probably one of the craziest things. You don't always see it, but I've definitely seen the black eyes, and I think probably the most craziest thing and abnormal thing about that was the triangulation of the face. I've seen this person's facial structure starting to triangulate at the cheekbone, and you could actually see that happening to the person. And that was probably the craziest thing that I've seen within a possession.
Bizarre thing to witness, because it looks like hands are pulling this face down. Yeah. And when James said black eyes, he means the pupils dilate to the point where the irises are essentially black.
Wow.
Which can happen in natural circumstances in a way to some extent, but when you have that, and of course the triangulation of the face, the deforming of the face, you start to question and figure out what's going on, because that doesn't happen in normal sense.
My brother Keith who's also a demonologist. My twin brother, he has video footage, a film of someone under a state of what was suspected to be possession, and her eyes turned very black. Even the whites of her eyes look black. How that happened?
Man.
Wow. Is that out on Ghosts Are Near?
Yeah. Yeah. He has shown that on his Ghost and Ear show that he and his wife Sandra host. And it's a talk show with some very interesting topics and guests. And he has displayed that footage on one of his episodes.
An excellent show, I might add. I've watched many of them. But...
we've been guests, yeah. I'm sure we're guests. Once in a while, I wheedle my way in. Should have us both on together.
That's my question. Yeah. So I was hoping the both of you could tell our faithful and maybe not so faithful listeners a little about how you each came to become demonologists. Did you read handwritten grimoires by candlelight as young men, or was it an influential person or event that happened in your life that maybe turned on that infrared light for you?
For me, yes and yes. I was very involved in arcane readings when I was in my teens. And yes, I would light a candle and read by candlelight and just love that atmosphere. I was always interested in spirit communication. Grew up in a somewhat haunted household, too. There was phenomena occurring. This is back in the 1970s. And, strange things were happening. But another juncture was when I became acquainted with Ed and Lorraine Warren. And Ed was a lay demonologist. Both Ed and Lorraine are deceased now. But I learned some things from Ed. I would lecture with them. And that was a golden time. Okay. I did not agree with all their ideologies and all their practices and approaches, but it was very valuable learning because they had all the experience. So Ed and Lorraine Warren, I met Ed and Lorraine Warren at a lecture at Rhode Island College, and this was April 1972. I was at the time 1 year old. But no, I was a little older. But I was in my I met them there, and my brother and I were both quite impressed with their presentation. So this is the real deal. This is the people who are getting out there and seeing these things and participating and intervening.
Sure.
Yeah, so we became acquainted with them, and it wasn't too long later. It was a year later, in fact, that we became acquainted with the Perrin's family. Perrin and in Harrisville, Rhode Island, and I was then, and my brother and I were members of a group, a paranormal investigating group, based at Rhode Island College, where I'd met the Warrens. In fact, that was the night I was invited to join their team. So we were contacted by Miss Carolyn Perrin. She and her husband Roger were having inexplicable experiences in their farmhouse, which was built in, I believe, 1737 or 1736. And so we came to their house, and yes, there was phenomena occurring there. After we had investigated there for a month, we decided it might be a good idea to call in Ed and Lorraine Warren. I think it was my brother's idea to do that. My brother placed an ad in a local paper, in the Observer. It's not that we felt we were in over our heads. We just thought it would be a nice professional touch to bring in the experienced Ed and Lorraine Warren. I said Lorraine ended up taking over, which we had not expected. But it was an interesting time and interesting situation. That was 46 and a half years ago. And that was my introduction to a residential case. That was our first residential case, my brother's and I, in this group at Rhode Island College. All kinds of things were happening in that household. So that 46 years later, that became the inspiration for the motion picture, The Conjuring. And they still call that house in Harrisville the Conjuring House.
That's right. And I know you were there last year on Ghost Adventures on the Halloween special.
And so was Miss Elise. Elise Carlson was there as well. And she's behind the scenes, but she was right there in the house and got to meet everybody. And all. She's been to the house about a dozen times. Perhaps she's been doing research on that house and its background, the property. So, yes, it is an interesting house. Still, it's owned by Corey and Jen Heinzen now, who come from Maine.
Right.
And they report frequent activity in the house. And some of the things they tell of, I experienced all those years ago. Like a blackness issuing through the hallways and into the rooms, like a shadow. This is if somebody had turned down the lights, but this will happen in the middle of the day. And they reported that. Their son, Kyler, has experienced that. And this is before I told them what I had seen there. And noises, footsteps, like the house has a personality. The house is a personality. It has a life of its own, and I think a mind of its own.
One of my questions for you later was going to be what if it felt different to you now or last year than it did when you were in college.
Very much the same in nostalgia. I won't say I get especially spooked in that house. It more feels like embracing. It feels familiar to me. And because it looks the way it did all those years ago. And in fact, there's a mirror in what was a parlor, and it's been a dining room too. And there's the mirror hung on the wall. I looked in that mirror, and this was last July. I looked in that mirror, and I saw myself when I was 17 years old. I did, and I'm not prone to impressions and seeing things, but I blinked and I looked, and I was looking at myself with the longer hair, and I was 17 again.
Wow.
I had time to really analyze that. I said, I don't know why I'm seeing this. This is like a time displacement. Can you imagine my letdown when I went and saw myself in the bathroom mirror? It's like, no, that's very temporary. That was a little mirage for a while. I was good looking.
I really wish that would happen to me. I keep trying, but now it's just.
Answer your, you can see that mirror in that house, man. It'll do it.
I know Andrea. I've interviewed her before, and she talked about some time displacement and her family being able to see her dressed up in a different, in a Victorian garb.
15 years old, Andrea. I still can. She was quite a presence even then. But to answer your original question, after several of these involvements, I found a magazine article somebody had brought to me. You're in a magazine, Carl. So I read it, and I was referred to as a demonologist, or the demonologist. And I had heard that term applied to Ed Warren, but I thought, demonologist? Okay, I guess so. I like the ring of it.
Yeah,
That's
can't
how
get around with it.
In the movie
Awesome.
theater, demonologist, and they clear out, and I've got the whole row to myself.
James, what was your influence? What got you started with this?
So I basically started not because of living in a haunted house or like similar stories most people you hear or explained saying that they dealt with it in a physical sense and lived in that location while it was happening, and it really brought them to want to understand the unknown. Really, basically, what it was for me that really got me into paranormal investigating, and more so demonology in the long run, was just things that happened to me as a child. You know, things that made me question a higher power, or what we would call as God, and of course Christianity. But was my disdain for God at that point in my age, and it really at a young level really sought me out to go read things about evolution, things about theology, and many different religions to try to come up with some idea of why God would do this to me as a child and why I would go through these things. And basically, through a lot of these questions, it got, one of my favorite shows back in the day was Unsolved Mysteries. Of course, I grew up on Scooby-Doo and all these very similar things. And so it really led me to one point in asking if I could figure out what ghosts are, maybe I could come up with a closer, an answer to figuring out what God is or what heaven or hell is. So within those questions and within getting into paranormal research at the age of 14 years old and going out to the local cemeteries and places maybe I shouldn't have gone, but I wasn't in a bad sense to those locations to do any damage. I was there in interest, but doing these locations and these cemeteries and local surroundings, it really started getting me very well versed within the field and with equipment. And sometime I actually had met Carl through an individual and became tech manager for his group at that time, and basically is kind of one of the things that led me down the demonology path, because I really do say Carl is my first mentor. But within my research of theology, of course, I had touched upon demonology and angiology, and was always interested in it, was always interested in the concept of evil and how does evil exist, like our show before we came on this show. The origins of evil, and when I really truly experienced a true demonic entity, a lot of answers were answered for me, in my opinion. But that's basically what got me into demonology, was the so many different levels of questioning that I had, and then dealing with my first residential case and seeing how the person reacted, to the activity, even though it wasn't bad, and they wanted it gone. It really was a launching pad to ministry work, but also demonology work as well.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
James and I almost met earlier. We were involved in he was a member of a team based in Rhode Island Paranormal Society, and we addressed this case with my group at the time, Beyond the Veil Paranormal Research. We intervened on the family's behalf. This was in Orange, Massachusetts, which is kind of northwest near the border of Vermont. James was a member of that team, so we came this close to meeting each other then. Before then, yeah. But we did soon after that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Synchronicity and all things.
That was a case of demonic possession, and that actually occurred.
Yeah.
It was actually not the household members, but it was one of the investigating team that was taken over by an invasive entity. So,
and that was almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. March 2010.
Wow.
What were you doing? You were younger.
Oh yeah, I was a lot younger than I am now.
You're a lot younger than me. Still are.
Yeah, and better looking.
Yeah. Wow. That's why I hang close to him, so you blend.
Yes, kid.
Profile. Thank you. You look like an Easter Island head there. Look at me.
Easter
Island. It's the light. The lights.
Behind one of us?
Gooba Gaba, one of you, one of us. You don't understand the
I can change that. Ooh, there we go.
Oh, there's a light. Whoa.
Hey, that's a little better.
Like a
Coming
bizarre
out of the
epiphany.
shadows there.
Yeah. Shadows.
What's your question, Chris?
No, I was going to ask one of your questions about would these, say, demonic entities or energies, do they ever go by the name of like Asmodeus or, one of the.
Well, a connection has been established with those names. I think all of those names are of human origin, but they are resonant. They strike a responsive chord with these entities, and they will answer to those names because they have associations, the power of association, nomenclature. They are ancient names, so they have gained power over the many years where they were believed in. I don't think these entities were created and had these names attached to them originally. They may predate the human race. So, Asmodeus, of course, that's a later Grecian origin, rooted in Assyrian culture, and
Yes.
Diabolus and Euronymous. You can trace their origins because many of these names they were actually revered as
Gods.
gods, beneficial entities, deities,
Right.
and of course they become associated with the infernal realm with time. But that's not to say they're not potent names because people have used them sorcerers have used them in conjurations, and they gain a power. It's like an energy displacement. It's like plucking the string of a guitar. It resonates and it brings them forth. So people can conjure in these names and get unpredictable results.
But there's also a false reality too, where I come forth and say, there's a lot of times where, at least specifically me, when I'm brought into a case and investigating teams on recorders have these names, and we've got to come to the conclusion that we must remember that demonic entities are master manipulators. So a lot of the times that when people get these names on investigations, usually and most likely it is an intelligent spirit trying to mock or have fun with, because in reality a demonic entity would never truly come forth with its name, because then it's given its facade up. It's the reality has been broken. We already know what this entity is, and a demonic entity, like I said, is a master manipulator. So them giving them names up so willy-nilly, it just wouldn't truly happen.
It's kind of like, you want me to be Bill Fager, I'll be Bill Fager for you. If that's float your boat and that gets you to talk to me and fear me or think I'm something else.
Yep. We've gotten a few on our own investigations. We've gotten Beelzebub not too long ago, and it was a question that I had.
It's the question we have too.
Because I've had that feeling like other spirits can step up. You try to use the name, and now you're not actually talking to the demon.
Oh, I know that name.
Right.
You got to remember that we tend to forget the levels of hauntings and the different characteristics of haunting, and a lot of time we like to use the word intelligent. If these things are of intelligence, of course they can use intelligent thinking and intelligent responses, and of course they can also joke around and mess with us because they're intelligent. So
they're not mind readers, but they are very perceptive. They have what we could call the wisdom of the ages. They have the experience on their side, and they know how humans are going to react. And as I was saying, conversely, it's not always your Uncle Louie, to use a cliche.
Right.
It's the spirit masquerading as the loved one or the personality you're trying to contact, the personality of a deceased person. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know who's coming in.
That's the thing we have. What we're working on. We had to kind of open the gate again to this, but we really think that it is a cluster. We don't even think it was ever a human form. We just think it's just a cluster of, energy that is just evil. We really do.
Concentration of a repository of evil influences.
But exactly, there's been people that go and pray to it and conjure it and stuff as well. And the thing I was going to ask you as well, something like that, do you think that with us obsessing on it and talking about it and things, we could actually conjure it to like our own homes, to ourselves?
I think that really comes into the fall of laws of attraction, laws of intent. I think a lot of people say, especially with what we do, you know, with us researching, it adds some invitation. It's not necessarily against the truth, because I think once you start poking around, there's a thing that we say that we are marked, but I think that's also more so the applicable involvement, and once we get involved. But I think it's really comes to the attrition where if you have evil intent and bad attraction to what it is and you're talking about it, then there's that possibility for something to intercede and become with you or within your house. But I really think that has to deal with what the basis is of what you're doing with. You know, if you're doing it for the wrong reason, you might get what you want. If you're doing it for just a study, then there is less harm and less, I think, dangers to it. But there's dangers to everything. You know, if you start trying to dabble in the dark arts because you're studying demonology, then there's a difference. But if you're involved with it, then of course you're involved with it. So that possibility of involvement at any point in time in your life is always going to be there. But if you're just studying it, especially in a good intent, in good fashion, then I don't think there's any dangers to it. But other people might.
As long as it's
We
approached
don't want to
guardedly.
dwell on our stuff too much, but we just something we have noticed, something we've been working on, and we talked about in other shows, that we are able to more or less communicate with it in different locations. So we were wondering if you've encountered things that weren't so location specific. We don't know whether we are crossing the line of having something like an attachment, or whether just by having it on your mind enough, because we came into this rabbit hole, not trying to conjure it so much, but the rabbit hole of trying to solve the puzzle. There's like a puzzle kind of being presented to us. And when we were thinking about it a lot, we were finding that, you know, we could put on a spirit box in our house and get the same answers. And, you know, we got on location and other locations. So that's where that question was coming from.
I think sometimes, usually they are rooted to usually they're rooted to a locale, specific location, but of course they can travel. You remember the premise of the book and then the movie, The Exorcist. The Exorcist Father Merrin, Lancaster Merrin, encounters a demon in Iraq, and that demon manifests again in Georgetown and Washington. So he knows that he's going to encounter that and have a final showdown with this demon. And the demon has possessed the girl, Reagan Teresa McNeil. So he encounters this demon again, which in Iraq was known as Pazuzu, very ancient spirit.
Right.
Demon of pestilence and hurricanes or storms. And when he encounters this demon again, that's his last trial, and he has to stand his ground against this demon again. That's the premise of The Exorcist, and I think that can happen. I wonder if something I encountered long ago might manifest somehow, somewhere, and if I'll recognize it when it does. Keeping in mind, you can't rely on what a spirit tells you any more than you can believe everything another person tells you. You know, you just have to go with gut instinct and experience, and be guarded at all times and prepared. But there could be another showdown for me. I don't know. Maybe I'll encounter an entity again that I stood against. And what Ed Warren said once always stuck with me. Once you are recognized or stand close to the demonic realm, they will always know you. You're marked, and they will always have your number. They'll always have a resentment against you. So
It's kind of like poking the bear, you know?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I
And
get that.
your witnesses too.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned ancient Iraq, which was Sumeria or maybe Babylon back
Babylonian.
then.
Mesopotamian.
The Babylonians treated demons in a different way. They were more or less gods. They weren't really the evil characters that we call them now.
The plantings, the origins of Judaism, which of course begat Christianity, this was in ancient Sumer, and after they had traffic with other cultures, you know, they were like, their gods were Ahura Mazda, and you know, a whole pantheon they had that they believed in. And after a time in that region, the god El, El, That's how it's spelled,
Mhm.
surfaced. And that was the beginnings of a belief in the one God. But that one God had a wife at the time when this entity was first believed in, and that was when he was Yahweh. And that's actually as close as we can get to knowing God's name. The biblical God is Yahweh. Even that is an abbreviation or an acronym. No, Yod He Vohe. It is forbidden to know God's name, so that's as close as we come to being able to pronounce God's proper name. And I don't think God is meant to have a proper name, but we're talking culturally.
And you look at basically the word demon too, the lineage of it coming from Greek of daemon. And in Greek mythology, daemons were actually benevolent beings, benevolent entities that actually were overseers. They actually would spy on humans and revert back and tell the gods if the humans were doing something wrong. So there's a translations difference too, from a daemon to demon, even though they come from the same etymology, the same lineage of words.
That's the word I was going to use for it. Yeah, and the connotation morphs with time. Now demon, of course, that's culturally imprinted as an evil spirit. You can't say demon without thinking of something evil, wicked. A lot of that had to do with The Exorcist too. That was a point in modern demonology, when The Exorcist emerged. People could define what possession was, and an assaulted demon. I mean, it was believed in before, of course.
Yes.
But that gave us an overall picture, a zeitgeist of what a demon and demonology and demonic possession is.
Yeah, and it became really popular too with demonology in itself became more popular in the time of witches and witchcraft and of course the Salem witch trials and of course before that. But that's where demonology, if you read the book, demonology, there's a lot to do with that as well. So that it's very, very diverse of many different things.
It seems to be insurgent because it comes on every once in a while, like perhaps every 50 years or so. That seems to be a more interest in spiritualism and the occult. And then there's the occult revival in the 1960s, beginning around 1965. And then when the Church of Satan was established in 1966. And then when The Exorcist, the book is released in 1971. The movie is produced in 1973, comes out in 1974. And, of course, it frightened many people and then raised awareness of the possibility of demonic possession.
It is based on a true story.
Yeah, based on an actual account, and that was billed, increased its popularity. People were very afraid of demonic influence at that time. I remember I was around for it. But there was a spike in the sale of Ouija boards. Spirit boards.
Sure.
Couldn't keep them on the shelf for a while.
Much like the spiritualist movement of like the 1920s and early 1900s.
And
the Fox sisters and all that.
60s, and you got this revival like in the 1920s, like you're saying, a century ago now.
That was what the Fox sisters was the 60s, right? 1860s?
Fox sisters. I think they were a little earlier. I think the 1840s.
1840s?
Yeah.
Okay, it'll go back a little further.
And you get waves, every several decades there's an insurgence, a new a wave of interest in the occult and the paranormal. People want to experience. It's always with us, but it tends to have revivals from time to time.
It's always been popular too. You look at a lot of people forget the Ghost Club, Charles Babbage and Charles Dickens, very masterful minds. Charles Babbage was basically he's the father of technology, and he was involved, with the Ghost Club. So it's been very insertive part of pop culture.
Then you jump ahead to years, and you've got the Order of the Golden Dawn, and McGregor Mathers and Aleister Crowley.
The wickedest man in the world. That's what it's called.
He really embraced the wickedest. Somebody, a reporter wrote in England, it was the Scottish Satanist, the wickedest man in the world. Aleister Crowley just loved that. He adopted that, used that the rest of his life. And the wickedest man in the world. He was an interesting personage.
Absolutely. Demons. What do demons mean to you guys specifically? I mean, in general, I think a lot of people use it as a blanket term to cover any kind of non-human entity. I mean, people talk about thing from fairies to puckwudgies to elementals to the
Jinn.
To the jinn. Thank you.
Right. You're welcome.
Have you encountered those sort of entities, or do you follow that, or do you think spirits themselves can be demons? What is your
Well, there's an interpretation of some non-physical entity that we encounter, unless it's angelic and known to be angelic, is actually a demon masquerading as another type of spirit. Again, it's the unknown. We are dealing with the unknown to a large degree. But the demon means to me, I accept the modern connotation. I have to, when people refer to demon, they mean something wicked, something evil. We don't have another name to apply to them at this time. Not non-corporeal agencies.
I agree to an extent. Demons, by biblical scripture, of course, are fallen angels to the most extent. And demons, if there were fallen angels, are non-physical beings. They are spirit in form. I would say there's people that use the demon word and blanket it, but if you look at the different entities like jinn, a jinn is an elemental. So a demon is not an elemental being. They are spirit. They're a spirit being, while as a jinn would be elemental of many different elements. And jinn are actually misinterpreted as well, because everybody thinks that they're just an evil entity or malevolent. They're actually a neutral entity. They could be benevolent or malevolent depending on the situation why they're invoked, and sometimes curses. There's also Pakwaji, like we were talking about, by a man named Andrew Lake, who's very popular on that. We actually got his book right there. But Pakwajis is another thing. They are said to be elemental, and of course, much older than.
Here you go, Andrew.
Lake,
Ghost
right?
Hunting Southern New England by Andrew Lake of Greenville, Rhode Island. Who heads Greenville?
That's a great book. I have that book, and I've talked to him before. He's a character.
I think the blanketing of the term, you have to dissect it, and that's why people like Carl and myself and many other people are there, because it is blanketed, and I think that's where the issue lies, where everybody thinks it's demonic, but they don't understand the different characteristics, the different aspects of haunting, or processes of how these entities interact with people. With demons, it goes from infestation to possession, while a jinn might come from a curse, or you might deal with a Pakwaji and a different, or a fairy. So there's different characteristics to these hauntings and how they interact with the people. So that's something you have to look at too, as well, because that's important.
Yes, and the jinn, of course, is where we get genie from. When one summons or constrains a genie, they hope it's a good genie and it's going to conform to their will. But how do you know? Are you a good genie I've conjured? I've called forth? Yes, I'm a good genie. I'll never. You open yourself up and I'll give you your will.
It's not like Aladdin.
I dream of Genie, because a little different imagery there.
I was never able to call her up, and she didn't call me either. So.
Yeah, another one too that it's not really talked about, even though it is misconception, is like a divik, in Judaistic entity, and people tend to forget in Judaism too. You can say, even though they have diviks, they actually have golems too that aren't very positive, but people forget to talk about
golems. They're pretty mindless though. A golem was basically a statue or a representation of a human being, and a magical symbol is carved onto usually his forehead, and this will animate the golem, and he must obey the magician's will. But I don't think a working model was ever made, but it's in Hebraic lore. The golem, the divik.
Yeah, a bit like a puppet or
box we've heard about, which is like a wine cabinet, and
but that was a story concepted by somebody.
The Dybbuk box.
What, the Dybbuk box?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of spooky because that's supposed to be a demonic entity that's encased in like a casket, a small box, and if you open it, and it's got a scroll on it, and with Hebraic figures painted on it, and if you open that box, then it's going to release. It's going to free the demon in.
Yeah, for $100 on eBay, you can buy one.
Yeah. In fact,
That's true. There's a
museum
lot of good stuff out there on eBay.
a long time ago. Yeah.
Not sure I trust it all.
No.
No. It also comes in the same token like we talked about earlier, the laws of intent, laws of attraction. You buy it for negative reasons. You never know what you're going to open, right?
Yeah, well, people do things on a dare because it's thrilling, because it's exciting. Ooh, I've got a divot box. They say it's got a demon. I don't believe in that, but you're going to open it. I'm not going to open it.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the case of Annabelle, the haunted Raggedy Ann doll. That is in the Warren's Occult Museum. It's now run by Tony Spera, and who you well know.
Mm-hmm.
And this Annabelle doll, who of course inspired the movie of that name, it's kept in a glass case, and there is a warning sign: "Do not, under any circumstances, open this. Do not touch."
Yeah. Positively, do not touch.
That's what positively do. However, there's a picture in one of the books, ghost written, for Ed and Lorraine Warren. There's a picture of Ed and Lorraine with the Annabelle doll, and Lorraine holding it. So
Yeah, I've
they
seen
have
that.
impunity. That they're guarded, they're protected, but don't let anybody else touch them. Now, personally, if I saw the Annabelle doll, I mean, if somebody tossed it to me like a joke, I'd say, yeah, that's very funny. It wouldn't bother me, though. But if I were of a mind to actually take this out and dare it, like, oh, I'm not afraid, that's setting up a lodestone in my mind, even in my subconscious. So I'd have to be careful driving back, because people have run afoul when they challenged that and said, oh, I'm not afraid of this doll. But things happen on the way home.
That's not a great idea. Yeah, can be a rough road home. Yes.
Who knows how much was paranormal, preternatural, how much was a psychological planting.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Same with magic.
About those, and they're like the television shows, in a sense, educate us, the paranormal reality television. But I got to tell you, I think maybe not every single thing you see on the television is real. I mean, I don't know. Call me naive. There might be, I'm just hinting that there might be one or two instances that are rather contrived or, like engineered. It might not be all real. Everybody has to make up their own mind.
Yeah, I think we also come to the point in time too where we call everything paranormal. But if it was in fact paranormal, then it wouldn't really be the word paranormal, would it?
No.
So it would be a natural fact.
Yeah. Right.
And
it would be normal.
It would. Yeah. We overly throw that terminology in the terminology preternatural.
I like preternatural. Once you learn how to say it, it's a good word. Preternatural, preternatural.
But at the same token, though, we all think a lot of people think everything's paranormal, but like I said, in fact, it's not.
Do you think that? I don't think that.
I don't.
There's people that do. No, not everything's paranormal. It's nice to assign paranormal to, because it explains things away.
Easier
in fact, I remember 45 years ago, nobody was saying paranormal. We were all saying parapsychology. It's a Hans Holzer term.
Right. Hans Holzer
became with the reality shows.
I was a big fan when I was younger.
His book Ghosts.
Yeah. Hans Holzer. Well, he was actually like the Warrens. He was a pioneering paranormal investigator.
Absolutely.
That's what is on things.
So wasn't Harry Price too? A lot of his things are still used to this day. Mm-hmm. Harry Price is the one that created the bells and the powder ideology.
Yeah, Harry Price is, a stepping stone in paranormal investigation. He's pivotal. You wouldn't have paranormal investigation and parapsychology as it is today, as it's established, if it weren't for the groundwork laid by names like Harry Price and Hans Holzer.
I've never heard Harry Price though.
Yeah. In fact, Hans Holzer also coined the term ghost hunting.
Mm-hmm. He did.
It wasn't said before.
And he used a compass, which was like the first tool.
Oh, that's right.
That works. Magnetic principles, if it works,
That's right.
Tools are more sophisticated now, so we can record better. But it's basically intuition comes into play.
Yes.
Never lose your sense of intuition. You're maybe not total reliance on intuition, but it's a guiding post for you. If you're a paranormal investigator, you have to go on gut feelings sometimes.
That was one of my questions to you guys. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to ask you, when you assess these places, how do you feel? Are you clairsentient, clairaudient? Are you anything like that, or you just go with your gut and
I like to say I have a good active discerning people, so discernment, but I basically don't like to equate myself to have any abilities. I don't like to say I'm clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvisual. I don't like to say I'm psychic medium. I don't like to coin with myself with anything. I basically like to explain it. I've done this for so long, so I think my body has come accustomed to understanding different things, like anybody naturally could. So if I was in the presence of evil, which I think if anybody is in the presence of evil, it's very suppressive, and I believe anybody can feel it. But I think I can feel shifts within the environment because of naturally being around it for so long. You can understand your body's the best tool, so you listen to your body, and that's how I have come attuned with investigating and especially assessing cases.
Well, I thought it was a pretty cool Gilbert Stewart song in 1972. Oh, Claire, Claire, the moment I saw you, I swear. It's not funny because you're not old enough to remember that song. You're not. But Lorraine Warren was a clairvoyant, French, voyant. She had the sight, and there's, of course, clairaudience, clairsentient, where you see things before they happen. And all that. It's all perception. I do have something of an ability with that. I don't know if I'd call it a gift because I can't turn it off and on, but I dream of things that come to pass and get just that gut feeling, and there's usually a reason for it, but I can't anticipate it. It just comes out. Like when an early example, when I first pulled up the gravel driveway of Round Top farmhouse, the Harrisville house that became the Conjuring house. I had my spider sense was tingling. I said, there's something up here. I just feel it like a stone in myself. Why feeling this? Why? I know we're going to a reportedly haunted site, but I didn't expect to feel this. And it was borne out. There was activity there. And sometimes if you've heard a lot about a situation, then of course you're going to feel something.
yeah.
But
Power suggestion.
Yeah, I think both James and I have developed that intuitive sense of when they be redundant there, of when it's a really malicious entity you're coming up against, because it does not want you there. You just feel unwelcome.
Right.
You get that more on a gut level, a kind of intuitive level.
Mm.
So as we're getting down to the last minutes of the show, where can everybody find Duo Daemonologie? Where can they find you guys?
You
can find Duo Daemonologie on Facebook, Duo Daemonologie, or duodaemonologie@gmail.com. You can email us or individually reach out to us, James Annitto, Annitto.
And Carl Johnson, how do you spell JohnsonSOT? Yeah. Carl L. I put L in it because, Johnson, Carl L. Johnson and James Annitto. And again, Facebook is a good source because people are on Facebook a lot. So look up Duo, with that archaic spelling, Duo Daemonologie. Also, there's Panorama Paranormal. And actually, the director is Elise Gianmarco Carlson. And you can find a link to us and Duo Daemonologie through Panorama Paranormal, which is an interesting topic in itself. Panorama Paranormal is inclusive of odd phenomena, the preternatural, which is like a lot of things. And so we're not limited to ghost hunting or Panorama Paranormal. If it's something aberrant or like strange, inexplicable sinkholes or missing people that have strange ramifications, ufology, cryptozoology, all encompassing, truly panorama, paranormal.
It reminds me of a lens, and I think we all need to widen our lens a little bit with it because it isn't just, ghosts. And there's a lot of phenomena out there, for sure.
I said, wow, there's more to this earth than I ever conceived of. Horatio.
Right.
Absolutely.
So you can find us. We're not that hard to find. If you look, demonologists, Duo Daemonologies, look for us and by our names, or Panorama Paranormal, Duo Daemonologie.
And we have plenty of events coming up. Our first one will be February 29th in Rochester, New York. That'll be our first Duo Daemonologie lecture of 2020.
Mm-hmm. There's also my own website, Demonology Incorporated. Thought that had a nice ring to it.
And JamesAnnitto.com.
Yeah, it certainly does.
Yeah, can't forget that one, JamesAnnitto. You're really in trouble if you forget that.
Yeah, right. If I forget my own website.
It's like forgetting my twin brother's birthday. You know, I hope
Right.
if I ever don't send him a card.
At least that one's easy to remember.
Yeah. December 9th, by the way.
So I
Well,
just
You just
Yeah.
missed.
well, happy belated birthday.
happy
you.
belated birthday.
I was in good.
45 seconds.
We hope to see you guys. I did see that you had an event coming up at the Oliver House.
Mhm.
Yeah, that looked pretty interesting. Kristen and I may be
Sure.
looking into that.
You definitely should. It would be great. It's going to be all the proceeds go back to the Oliver House, which is always amazing when that can happen, because you got to remember that these places are historic sites, and when you can give back to history and maintain history for other generations
Yeah.
to see it.
Obviously, we're not in this for the money. $5 back.
You aren't?
It's going to be after the weekend.
Oh gosh, I definitely need that $5. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Man.
I got all my stacks over here. It's just off camera. My stacks of
My car is
paranormal cash.
Oh my God. I'm about $2,400 and something into car repairs, and I'm on basically stasis at work now. See, it's seasonal, so my car is paranormal. It's interactive. It's responsive. It wants me. It gets me places. I'm not.
That's awesome. Well, we want to thank you guys again.
Yeah,
And
thank you so
we
very
really
much.
appreciate you guys coming on, and good luck with everything you're doing as Duo
Thank you.
Demonology. We'll be looking for you guys, and
Nothing else.
again, have a great night.
You as
Thank you.
well.
It's
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Have us back.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Bigfoot.
And the bunny.
We'd like to thank Joe Montaldo for his engineering and support.
Thank you, Joe.
Be sure to look for us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter.
You can also find us at Dark Horse Paranormal and Purple Raven Paranormal by searching those very same outlets. You can email us at bigfootandthebunny@gmail.com. Thank you.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Bigfoot.
And the bunny.
We'd like to thank Joe Montaldo for his engineering and support.
Thank you, Joe.
Be sure to look for us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter.
You can also find us at Dark Horse Paranormal and Purple Raven Paranormal by searching those very same outlets. You can email us at bigfootandthebunny@gmail.com. Thank you.
Catch you later.
Bye.